All right, 10 o'clock now. I'll give it a few more minutes.
Okay.
I'll give a quick intro just to myself. My name's Taylor Wilson. I work with Libro Credit Union just out of our downtown branch at the moment. I'm an investment specialist, so these types of accounts are kind of what I'm dealing with on a daily basis. I'd like to think I'm an expert in them, but these do surprise me every now and again, as you know, there's government incentives with these programs, and they tend to kind of offer new things every year. So sometimes these things do change, but always good, even if you've known about these accounts, for a quick refresher. Something always good to have.
Thank you.
No worries.
We are so grateful to have you on board. My name is Myrna Projek, and I'm with Lifespin. I'm an assistant, and my dog's awake, so I apologize if my dog starts barking. No, he's gone back to sleep. So I'm so glad to have everyone here, and thank you so much, Taylor, for coming and doing this. Because it's such great information. I think that every child should have one. And I think statistics are the people in Canada that open up RESPs are usually people with a lot of money, because you get free money from the government for just opening up one.
Yeah, that's the thing. And the biggest thing I'm hoping to get out of this is just spreading these accounts by word of mouth, right? The barrier to entry is pretty small. It's just knowing about them and taking full advantage of them. So I'm hoping to just that today everyone takes in what they get and then also tells two other people, and the word kind of spreads, right?
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you, Taylor.
Perfect. So I'll jump into this. Thank you to Lifespin for putting this together. Myrna, thank you for putting this together and kind of bringing everyone here. You did the hard part. This is the easy part, actually talking about these accounts. But yeah, we'll jump into it. The basis for this presentation today is obviously just looking to save for post-secondary education. That be for yourself or for a child. More often than not, for a child is usually what we'll discuss with RESPs. Important things to realize is the cost of learning is increasing, just like everything else. Inflation is part of cost of learning as well. On average, education is increasing at a 3.3% annual basis. So on average, you'll see in 99 for one semester of tuition, it was about $3,328. Then in 2010, we jumped to $5,146, and then 2017 to almost $6,500. So obviously, price of education is increasing. So the demand for saving for post-secondary education obviously becomes a little bit more of a priority for parents. On average, a student following a 4-year program will leave university or college with about $35,000 in student loan debt. And the obligation to pay that back is usually within 6 months after graduation, usually when that job hunt is just starting to pick up. So there's this added stress of trying to find a career leaving school with the debt provided by schooling. So the account we're going to look at today is a way to combat that sort of stress and hopefully kind of relieve a little bit of the pressure on the shoulders of students when leaving school. That account in question is what we refer to as a Registered Education Savings Plan, or RESP, is oftentimes what it's referred to, or what you'll hear it mentioned as. So thankfully, these accounts exist to every Canadian resident, and they just help save for post-secondary education. So what is an RESP? In simple terms, it's an investment vehicle that will allow for you to save for post-secondary education or help finance post-secondary education for a beneficiary, oftentimes a child. And you're also entitled, with opening these accounts, to some possibilities of government assistance. And we'll go over those later on in this presentation. So I wanted to go over some key terms that I will reference when talking about RESPs. One being is the subscriber. So the person contributing, oftentimes the parent, to the RESP is what will be referred to as a subscriber. So if you hear me mention that, just kind of recognize that I'm referring to maybe as a parent or a grandparent. The person or persons, so you can have multiple beneficiaries on an RESP, will be those receiving the funds. So whenever I refer to beneficiary, I'm referring to those who are going to be using the money for education purposes, oftentimes the children. Another key factor to realize is there is maximums, just like other government registered accounts, there is maximums you're able to contribute to these. For the RESPs as of today, it is $50,000. Subscribers will hold that money. So that person who opened up the RESP and is putting money in for the beneficiary is actually entitled to that money until it's withdrawn for the beneficiary education. So that's one thing to keep in mind, that I think sometimes there's a misconception with these accounts that once money goes in, the only purpose now is simply just for the child to go to school. Not the case. It's still an account held in the subscriber's name or the parent's name. So it's not like it's going to be locked in until the child's going to school. There is these possibilities to withdraw, and we'll actually touch on those at the tail end of the presentation when we kind of talk about what it looks like to pull money out of an RESP. There are two types of RESPs to get familiar with. The most common one that you'll usually see is a family RESP. So that's more than one beneficiary in the plan as itself. For simplicity reasons, this is mostly dedicated to mom and dad, where they are contributing to the group of their children that they have. So if they have 2, 3, or 4 children, you're able to keep them all in one plan. Makes things much easier. And what the benefit to that actually is, when we talk about the government contributions that are associated with these accounts, you're able to actually spread that between children. So if you have grant room not used by a child, it can actually go to another child. So they're very flexible in that case, and that kind of helps when you have more than one child. Another RESP type is an individual. So oftentimes these are usually used for grandparents. The reason for that is, with the family plan I had mentioned previously, all beneficiaries and actually the subscriber on the account needs to be related. So in order to have that pooled RESP, everyone needs to be related by blood or adoption. Whereas an individual, that's not the case. Individuals can have a beneficiary named as almost anybody. Like I say, you'll often see that with grandparents or nieces, nephews. That's another common one you will see with individual plans. So it gives a little bit more freedom in that sense if the child you are looking to sponsor isn't actually related to you directly. What is needed to open an RESP? So when I talked about the barriers to entries before this started, and that they're very small. So not a lot is required to get these accounts up and running. Really all that's needed is for the subscriber or the person putting the funds into the RESP. They will just need a social insurance number as well as government issued ID. So that would be a passport, driver's license, or Ontario ID purple card. Those will qualify, and that's really all you would need to start. And then the beneficiary will need a social insurance number. So just keep in mind, if you're looking to start up a plan for a new baby or someone like that, they will need a social insurance number, because the government grants we're going to talk about are actually tied to the child's social insurance number.
For most in Canada, most babies, once you're born, and doulas, you probably know this, once they're born, they're issued social insurance number right at the hospital.
Yeah, pretty common that they'll kind of have you on it right away at the hospital. And that's all that's needed. So as soon as you have that for a child, won't even need a birth certificate or anything like that. That social insurance number is all that's going to be needed to start up this account. So you might be thinking now, why an RESP as opposed to maybe just setting aside money in your own personal savings account, waiting till your child's 18? And that's these two things here that are mentioned on this slide. So we have the Canadian Education Savings Grant, and I'll explain that in the next slide, and then also the Canada Learning Bond. So these are government incentives provided through RESPs themselves. So there's no other way to receive these incentives unless deposited into an RESP. So the most common and the most eligible for most Canadians is the Canadian Education Savings Grant. So this grant is tied with the contributions made by a subscriber or the parent. And what that looks like is the government will match 20% of your contributions per year up to $2,500. So meaning if you put in $2,500 the first year you start an RESP, you will receive essentially a free $500 contribution into that RESP as well from the government of Canada. There is a lifetime maximum similar to the contributions of $50,000 of $7,200 for the grant room. And that will strictly just be related to the government grant, not the Canada Learning Bond, which we'll mention next slide. There is carry forward room for the grant, so $2,500 isn't something you see too often, people contributing to a RESP on an annual basis. However, if you don't meet that $2,500 a year, you're actually able to carry forward the contribution room to another year. So there's no rush to make that contribution of $2,500 within a year to max out. You will have possibilities as the road pushes on to kind of capture that grant room that may have been missed previous years. Another important thing to keep in mind is that the grant contribution will end in the year that the beneficiary turns 17. So if the beneficiary is turning 17, let's say May of 2025, you're able to make contributions until the end of 2025, so December 2025, to still capture grant room, but following that year's end, you'll no longer be able to capture any grant. But you will still, however, be able to make contributions to the RESP. So it's always good to keep that in mind, essentially that to not expect the 20% payment following that year that the beneficiary turns 17. Now, if you have one of the family plans we discussed earlier, if the second beneficiary is still below 17, they will still capture grant room, just no longer the one that has surpassed the 17 years. And this is my favorite part about RESPs. So we talked about the learning bond, or sorry, the learning grant, where there is this necessity to make contributions to capture that amount. There is another thing, so the Canada Learning Bond, that actually requires no contribution. So simply, if you have this account open, no contribution is required. But if you fall under the fields I have labeled on this slide, so depending on your family income and the number of children you have, you could actually be entitled to up to $2,000 per child in learning bond without making a single contribution to the account. So even
and that wouldn't cost anything to the parent. It just
nope.
That's amazing.
$0. All it would take is just you have the requirements listed previously with the driver's license, social insurance number for both yourself and the child. You could walk into any major financial institution. All financial institutions will carry RESPs. By no means is it strictly a Libro thing or anything like that. You can go into the institution you're with right now and just open it up. And if you fall under the guidelines I just pulled this from the 2022, you'll see there requirements, and you could receive some learning bond. Now that amount can be prorated, so it could be a smaller amount if you don't meet those requirements exactly. So the 2,000 is just a maximum, so keep that in mind.
Still, that's amazing. Like, I think that's why families should, that's why everyone should have this for a child, because no matter what, it's free money for a child.
Exactly. And Mirna, you mentioned how you seem to be people with kind of larger incomes opening these accounts. Yeah. That's not really who they're looking to target with these accounts. They're really looking for the people that, need the assistance to send their children to post-secondary education. So even if, again, you don't plan on making a contribution anytime soon, just having the account open entitles you to this. And then the contributions can come down the road whenever you're able to. So there's no need to be able to ready to make contributions to the account. You can simply walk in your institution, open them up, and then and then just go from there, and at least make kind of getting your foot in the door and starting to save.
That's wonderful. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you.
No worries. Interrupt away. So in addition to your contributions, the government grant, the government bond, there is other ways that RESPs are beneficial. One of the main ways is that amount, so that your contributions, the bond and the grant, can actually be invested in an assortment of different things. We're going to look at a few of them, just kind of breeze over those. I'm more kind of focused on just explaining the accounts, but it's good to know that you're able to garner interest on those contributions and grow them over time. So there's a little bit more in the account when the child is ready to go to post-secondary. So those investments, just a quick breeze through of the investments you're able to hold. There's really no restrictions on types of investments. Common ones you'll see are fixed term investments. So those are something like GICs or guaranteed investment certificates. What those will look like is simply a fixed interest rate for a fixed period of time, little to no risk. And when you have a child who is 5, 10, and you have this time frame, It's definitely something interesting to look at to gain some sort of interest on that government grant or your contributions leading up to when they go to school at 17 or 18. Another one is mutual funds. So usually if you have a child who's really young, we would look towards something like mutual funds, and those are managed market portfolios. They tend to be a little bit more risky, however, over a long time frame have outperformed fixed term rates. So that would be more of a long-term solution. And if you're someone who is really eager into the stock market, you can actually find accounts through things like Wealthsimple, Qtrade, Questrade. That will actually allow you to manage your own investments inside of an RESP. I would advise against that unless you're very knowledgeable and you know your stuff, because that stuff could be quite risky. Another huge benefit of these accounts is tax-free growth or tax-deferred growth. So when I say that, I mean that when you look at the interest you'd make on mutual funds, fixed terms, or stocks, the tax implication on that isn't actually recognized until the child goes to school. And I'll touch on that when we discuss about how to pull money out of an RESP. But essentially, the taxes will be taxable to the child at the time they go to school.
And which they don't make a whole lot of money. So it's a win-win situation, right?
Exactly. They're oftentimes working part-time, so not making a whole lot of money. Or with schooling, you're also entitled to textbook and tuition tax credits. So another key thing to keep in mind, that will actually help you reduce your taxable income while also going to school. So essentially, what I tell people is oftentimes it works out to be tax-free for the child. I'll stop there for a quick second. So what we kind of discussed there was just what it takes to build the accounts, what the accounts will look like, and the sort of contributions or grants that are associated with it. Does anyone have any questions as far as kind of building up an RESP or what it takes to open an RESP? So I'm doing good.
I have a couple questions, of course.
Yeah, hit me.
So when you open up an RESP, you mentioned about post-secondary education, but it's for other things too, as long as it's centric to education. Like, say you have two children. One is like really academic, and the other one, he loves fixing cars, and he wants to go to school to learn about fixing cars. Could he use that? And can he put it towards like transportation to the school if he's going to school in Sarnia from London, say?
100%. I actually have that upcoming slides, but I'll hit on that right now. Because I don't go anywhere near in detail, but I think this is a good time to explain the details of what post-secondary really is. And the requirements are very, very broad. And that can range from anything from, like you said, the highly academic, so something like university or college, all the way down to even trade schools or vocational schools. So when I say vocational or trade schools, that would be something like North American Trade School. So anything from truck driving school, that sort of stuff as well. So massage therapy, beauty school. Yeah. So it's a wide array. There's actually a government website, and I'll support the link after with the recording of this that breaks down, and you can search an institution and it'll allow you to say that, or allow you to see if it's eligible for the credits. But you'll be hard pressed to find a school that isn't. And this will also expand outside of Canadian borders. So institutions outside of Canadian borders, if someone wants to go to school abroad, that will still qualify. And they'll be able to pull out the funds for that schooling. And by no means does this money need to go directly to tuition cost or book cost. Oftentimes what you'll see is, like you say, if someone's going to school in Sarnia or Toronto, where a vehicle is almost a necessity to kind of partake in that course, or if they have a placement somewhere. So as long as there is a proof of enrollment, which is a letter you'll receive from the school after you pay usually about a $200 non-refundable fee that saves your seat in the class, you will get a proof of enrollment letter. You're able to withdraw from the RESP. There is some restrictions, which I'll touch on, and that can go towards anything that you see fit for schooling. So whether it be a car, living cost, or the textbook and tuition.
That's amazing.
So that leads, no worries. That's a perfect transition into these next few slides. So there's three different ways. So the one we kind of just described is that number one there, the educational assistant payments. So that's with the proof of enrollment letter. That's going to require the funds to come out of the RESP with bond, with grant, and with growth, investment growth that the contributions have made. and that will be taxable in the child's hands. Another option is return of contribution. That's exactly what it sounds like. Oftentimes what you'll see is how I mentioned, where the subscriber is still technically entitled to the amount that they've put in this fund until it's withdrawn for school. So if anything were to happen prior to the child going to, or the beneficiary going to school, the subscriber is able to take out their contribution if needed from the RESP. So there is this aspect of it that when money is needed, you can pull that from there. It's not locked in by any means. What happens though when you do that is the 20% we discussed with the learning or with the grant is oftentimes clawed back because it was dependent on a contribution amount. And then the third is accumulated income payments. So refund of contribution is more associated with maybe prior or before the child goes to school, whereas the accumulated income payments would be maybe down the road after they've either left school and they haven't used the full amount, or they've grown and started a career without having to go through school. That's when we look at accumulated income payments, and we'll discuss on that what that looks like. So educational assistant program, or sorry, payments. That's essentially what we had already touched on. So the beneficiary is enrolled in an institute. They've supplied that proof of enrollment. They're able to withdraw the parents' or the subscriber's contribution, the investment growth, grant, and bond all to themselves. There is a restriction of $5,000 on the first 13 weeks of schooling. So that's important to know that the entire amount can essentially just come out right first thing when they go to school. Reason being for that is to avoid obviously enrolling in school, taking out a lump sum from the RESP, and then simply just leaving out after their first semester. So it also kind of encourages students that if you want to receive this money, it's expected that you go more than simply just one semester of schooling. And then that amount is restricted down to $2,500 for part-time. So that's another aspect that we can touch on, where not only is the list of institutes very broad, but it's also you're also able to withdraw for part-time studies.
That's amazing. That's
yeah,
wonderful.
Something that's super popular, I think, right now with COVID as well, where return to class is a little stagnant. There's some online learning, so some people may just be kind of putting their foot in the door with school before fully going into post-secondary. Still able to make withdrawals for things like laptops and all that sort of tech that's needed for post-secondary. Another important factor is that the funds are actually able to stay in this RESP until the beneficiary is 36. So no rush. I know a lot of parents probably don't want to hear me say that, but you know, again, with COVID, I think things like high school victory laps are super common right now. You know, there's no shortage of kind of part-time, full-time employment options where kids may want to go to work before, you know, viewing what they want to do for school. So it's important that you kind of not rush into post-secondary. You make sure it's something you really want to do. And as a parent, you can relax knowing that the money in the RESP can stay there for the child and still be growing interest until they're 36. So no sort of immediate rush to use the funds by any means.
It's interesting that I read today about British Columbia, that all these new jobs are expected to come available for people in healthcare. So a lot of you attending this can relate to that. But it said that the requirement is a post-secondary education for most of these jobs that are going to be coming up, which is interesting, you know?
No, for sure. And I think RESPs will be a good fit for anyone definitely looking into the medical field, because tuition costs are increasing very drastically and stuff like that is still pretty pricey. So just simply using these accounts to get your foot in the door is going to kind of at least reduce that debt stress a little bit for students, especially with the stress you'll go through with nursing school. Definitely a good kind of option to start with. Here's just a quick breeze through of the types of educational institutes that will be eligible to withdraw from an RESP. I wanted to just put all, but that's not necessarily the case. But like I say, the range is quite broad. Universities, college, which I think we all kind of associate with this type of stuff, but also, like I say, the vocational schools, so Westervelt, that sort of stuff, where even if someone who has entered the job field right out of school Oftentimes they want to expand their knowledge and that sort of stuff. And what that looks like is usually a part-time or full-time course through vocational schools. So Westerveld, Fanshawe offers some programs as well that are 1 to 2 semesters long. So we could have someone who's been in a career for 10 years now wanting to expand in that career and evolve their education and still be able to use their RESP even at 30, 35 when they may have already been working for quite some time. So there's benefits to leaving it there, even for career development's sake, not just necessarily fresh out of high school. Okay. So now we'll talk about some other things to kind of fill in the subscribers, so which I think most people on this call would be, so the people contributing to these plans. So there's the refund of contribution, which I touched on earlier. And what that is essentially the contributions that you have put into the RESP can be pulled out back to yourself and not to the beneficiary for multiple reasons. If the beneficiary is not attending post-secondary or if funds are needed, they're still accessible. Just keep in mind that the contributions are the only amount you're able to withdraw. So if I had put in $5,000, I had gotten $500 or $1,000 in grant, and that grant had also grown within my investment, I'm still only able to pull out the amount that I put in, so that $5,000. The remainder will have to stay in the RESP. The grant will likely be clawed back, but the learning bond and the growth, the investment growth that was earned, is actually able to stay in the RESP and be used for the child down the road. So it's not necessarily like the RESP would close. If it had been sitting there for quite some time and gaining interest, that interest stays there and there's still a little bit of money left for the beneficiary to use. And there's the accumulated income payments. So we talked about 36 being kind of the cutoff date for RESPs. This would maybe be what happens following the turning of 36. It's also able to happen after the beneficiary turns 21. But what this would do is essentially be able to take the contribution, so that $5,000 and the growth associated with it while it was invested, and be given back to the subscriber. What you'll usually see is the subscriber will take that into their RRSP, because if it's taken just all back to the subscriber, they will need to pay tax on the gains. But don't see this too often, but just know, I think the big thing to take away from this is that there is options after the fact for the subscriber. So the money is still very accessible to the subscriber for really any circumstance that comes out. Because oftentimes when talking about these accounts, parents will mention, well, I don't know if my child's going to go to school. How am I supposed to know what 20 years is going to look like for me? Just know you have these options and there is this liquidity to it and this ability to pull money out. So for a little bit more peace of mind as far as, contributing to these accounts. So that kind of hits on the question of why start now. And I think it's pretty self-explanatory with the bond and grant, where you can't receive these unless the account's open. So as far as, starting early, not only are you going to be able to receive possibly that bond or the grant with the contributions you're able to make, it's also going to grow. So with the money given by the government, they give you the ability to invest that money and let it grow over time. So the quicker you're able to start up these accounts and invest this money, more prone to compound interest. So you're earning then for making you're earning your interest, therefore making interest, and then growing over time. So having a longer time frame, longer possibility of growth. And then is also going to offer some peace of mind knowing that there is going to be some money set aside for the beneficiary. So once post-secondary does roll around, regardless of if they want to go or not, you at least have the money there to help reduce the stress. And that's really all there is to it. You could get a little bit more in depth with them. I think I went pretty far in depth, things that most people won't even encounter, like the refund of contribution and the accumulated income payments. But the big takeaway with that sort of stuff is, again, there's these options you have if child doesn't go to school or if it doesn't work out the way you thought it would. This money's still there and it's still payable to you. So perfect.
How does one start then? Do they, as long as they have their ID and the baby's social insurance number and their passport, do they just go into a bank and say, hey, I want to set this up?
Yep. Ideally, just book an appointment with your local institution. If you are a little bit more on the tech savvy side, there's options to open these online as well. That's kind of one thing that COVID's brought, where you can do a lot of things from your couch. So it's really, again, reduce the obligation to not have these accounts. So you really have no reason not to open them up at this point with how easy they've made it. It's just, again, hearing about them and knowing they're available. That's really the biggest barrier for people, is people don't know these are accessible to them. And as long as you're a Canadian resident and you have that social insurance number and that valid ID, these accounts are there for you.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't matter, like if a parent doesn't have a lot of money, they can just open it up and just let it sit there, and they have money for their child. That's amazing.
Exactly. So to give you kind of a feeling of what it might look like if you do enter your institution and try to open these accounts, if you go to the major financial institutions, so the CIBCs, TDs, the Libros, and all that sort of stuff, what they'll usually encourage is regular contributions. I know for us, it's a minimum of $25 at least a month. Usually what we'll do is we'll try to match it up with paychecks. So your paycheck comes in, the saving for education comes out before you even spend it. So you kind of are automatically saving without even recognizing it. Some of the online options are able to even do as low as $10 a month. So regardless on what the budget looks like, if you could spare $25, $10, you have the option to open these accounts. And again, you're getting essentially a free 20% return from the government alone right there. And then the rest is just going to be bonus.
That's amazing. Mm-hmm. And if, and again, if the child doesn't go to school or makes use of it, you can still get that money back that you put in the end. So it's not there's no reason for not doing it. So
exactly. There's very little risk. The money is still yours at the end of the day. It really, until it leaves the account for the child, that money is the subscriber. So the person contributing that money, the risk is really not there. And as far as missing out on the growth side of things, if you do pull the money out, you have that accumulated income payment option where you can take your contribution and the investment growth over the 18 some odd years and put it directly into your RSP. So there's always ways for subscribers and beneficiaries to take those funds out.
That's wonderful. And so they can contact you at this number or make an appointment if
yeah, so that's the branch number right there. If you just call in, you'll get directly to me. You could just ask for Taylor. He'll send you directly to me. There's my email as well. So any questions along the way, you're more than welcome. Even if you don't bank here, I'll gladly take questions still regarding these accounts. I also want to support some links. So maybe if I can get an email list after, I'll have that link of all the eligible institutions and that sort of stuff. So, and then that'll have all my contact information there as well.
Thank you, Taylor.
No worries.
Are there any questions from anyone else? I feel like I've always been the person at the front with the hand up, but does anybody else have any questions? It's a lot of information. So, but it is, man, I wish that they would automatically set children up at birth with one of these.
It is a lot of information. And if it is kind of a daunting thing to take in, that's where, your financial institution will be the best to go with. And just sit down with them, because they'll be able to at least put you in the right direction. And then, because I do think as you open these accounts, you slowly become to understand them a little bit better. Yeah. But if you have a full grasp on these and you're ready to kind of start saving, just know that those online options are there. So you could start right now, really. So.
Wow. Well, thank you, Taylor. We really appreciate it. And,
no problem.
Thank you, Cheryl, for saying that, and Samantha. That's wonderful.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I look to do some more. So there is some other accounts I wouldn't mind diving into. I mentioned RSP, so Registered Retirement Savings Plans. Those are another one I wouldn't mind diving into. There's tax-free savings accounts. Another one that I think I'll drop it in today, just for anyone to do their own research, that it blew me away even more than the RESP accounts, and that would be accounts RDSPs, so Registered Disability Savings Plans. Very, very interesting to look through and do your own research. I would love to do a webcast in the future regarding those accounts.
Wonderful. Yes.
But just to again give people a quick understanding of those, if you or anyone you know qualifies for the disability tax credit, they are eligible to open up an RDSP, so Registered Disability Savings Plan. And we talk about the 20% contribution that the government makes for RESPs. Well, with RDSPs, it can range anywhere between 100 to 300%. So in some cases, the government is tripling your money per contribution. So
could you say that in a real bottom line layman term?
Yeah. So if you qualify for a disability tax credit, you put money into an RDSP account, the government will triple it in some cases.
Wow. That's amazing.
Great accounts. And again, I rely on things like this to hopefully spread those types of accounts by word of mouth and have people who are eligible for them take full advantage of them.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. We would love to have you back to do some of these suggestions and have everyone please keep online with Lifespin. And I think this is going to be recorded. It has been recorded. And we're going to put that up on the website so you can refer back and also get a hold of Taylor too. That would be wonderful.
Perfect. And we're hoping to have this translated to Arabic as well. So if you can give us some time on that, I have Raneem on the call here. She's going to help me with that. So we can hopefully spread the message to a lot more people.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Raneem, too.
No worries.
You got your job ahead of you.
Alrighty, I'll open the floor for some questions. If there's no questions, I'll let everyone about their day.
It tells you did a really good job.
Thank you. For the first one, it's not too bad, eh? Alrighty. I'll let you guys go. Thank you for having me again, Myrna. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you,
Lifespin. Really informative. Thank you.
And then, down the road, I'm sure you guys will see my face again.
Thank you, Taylor.
No worries. Everyone have a great day.
Thank you all. Bye.